Okay, Proverbs 26, verse 1 is where we'll start. We're talking about Proverbs that deal with the subject of honor and shame, and really a good name, having a reputation that's good. We've talked a lot about it and said quite a bit. I won't try to repeat every other sermon, but I think it is important that we see that we've seen repeatedly that to make having a good name your goal means you're going to end up failing miserably. You have all the wrong purpose. Your goal is for yourself, for your name, and you're desperate to try to, hush any rumor. It doesn't matter whether it's true. But if you're making God the goal and you're making righteousness the goal, then from that, a benefit of that is the good name, because that's how it works. So this is not. This study should never be taken by anybody to say, so and so in some leadership position did something wrong, but we've got to protect his name. We can't tell anyone about the evil that such and such a pastor did because it'll hurt his name and hurt his ministry, and that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the good name that comes by righteousness, and the good name that comes through false means is actually not a good name, because it's not going to last. When we stand before God, we go into eternity, we will not go into it with a false good name. That is not how that works. Okay, so with that being said, I know I've said something like that many times in our study, but let's go to Proverbs 26, verse 1. I'll give you two Proverbs to start off with, and then we'll get your comments. And then I want to give you a series of Proverbs, starting with one in chapter 18. But let me go to 26, verse 1 first. As snow in summer, and as rain in harvest, so honor is not seemly for a fool. Now, I love this one because the picture here is repeated twice. And since we live in a different part of the world, we can get the first one, even though we don't get the second one. So, rain and harvest, we think, it's fall, it's raining, what's the big deal? Well, in the Middle East, especially in Israel, it almost never rains in harvest. That's what I've read. I haven't been there, but they'd say that it's extremely rare for it to rain during the harvest time. And we know that. We could just kind of read this proverb and pick that up because it's compared to snow in summer. And we get that, right? We understand, okay, summer, you're not supposed to have snow. We got plenty of that here in New England all the rest of the year. Sometimes in the fall, a lot of times in the spring, always in the winter, but still not very commonly in summer. Does anyone have, wasn't there a snow in June or something like 10 years ago or something? Somebody,
yeah, about 15.
Was it 15 years ago?
We were down at Victory.
Oh, yeah. So, but if it happens, it's incredibly rare. Just the chances are so slim. And nobody walks out of their home in June and or even July or whatever, and sees snow and says, "Oh, well, it's snowing." No, they're like, "What's going on? It's snowing in June." That's the picture that we have of the fool who gets honor. So, what's going on? This fool has a good name. Something's wrong here. This is not regular. Because a fool, the idea of, by the way, the fool is defined in Proverbs as the one who's living for himself rather than for the purposes of God. He's living without the fear of God. He doesn't have the purpose of satisfying and pleasing God. He's not afraid of displeasing God. He's living for himself. So the fool who lives for himself and gets honor, that's an incredibly rare thing. That's a surprising thing. And also it's probably very similar to snow in summer. It's gone very quickly. It's not lasting honor. Right? So I think that's interesting. Let's do one more, and then you may have some thoughts on these two. But it's right here in this chapter. So 26 verse 8. Proverbs 26 verse 8. Now this is interesting because I read a couple different takes on this, and I'll give you the one that I think is correct. verse 8 says, "As he that bindeth a stone in a sling, so is he that giveth honor to a fool." Bindeth a stone in a sling. Now, you're right to think about David with the sling, and hits Goliath in the forehead, and he comes down. Right, because this is written by David's son, Solomon. I mean, he wasn't there when David killed Goliath, but he heard about it without a question from his dad directly, and also from the scriptures, from 1st and 2nd Samuel that were certainly written by then. So he's saying here that someone is binding a stone in a sling. Let me give you the first interpretation of this that I think is probably not correct, but is a fair interpretation, and that is, that's just talking about putting it in the sling. And then you're going to sling and it goes out. And so you don't put a stone in a sling to stay in the sling. It goes in the sling and then it's gone very quickly. And so that's the idea that some would say, "As he that bindeth a stone in a sling, so is he that giveth honor to a fool. The fool's honor is gone very quickly." But I don't think that fits really well with what's being said. It's a person who's binding a stone in a sling is like a person that gives honor to the fool. The person who binds a stone in a sling is accomplishing his purpose, right? I mean, he puts it in there to sling it out. Who gives honor to a fool to let the fool ruin the honor? So that, I don't know if that parallel really works very well. And so I think in the majority of the commentaries that I read would agree with this, that this is probably talking about putting a stone in a sling and tying it there. Well, now you can't use the sling, right? The stone's supposed to be thrown out of the sling, and you've bound it up in the sling. And so, what's the point of that? The same way, putting honor on a fool is without purpose. You want to honor people with purpose. By the way, this is something that I think is really important at least from a leadership perspective in anything. But I think the church is a good example of that. That you want to take people who have done well and honor them as examples for other people to follow, right? I'm hoping that next year sometime we can have a service where we spend some time honoring Pastor Calvin Fuller, who passed away just a few months ago, and did a great work here in this church, and we don't want to honor him because we're making an idol out of Pastor Fuller, if we were to do that. And I hope we will do that. We would do that because we want to set him up and remember his example so that other people follow it. And that's a good thing, right? It's not worship to say, let's give honor to the people who have done an extra thing for the Lord, so that other people will follow in their footsteps. Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." That's not because Paul was all about himself. It's because he said, if I'm doing a good job following Christ, then just follow that pattern, and you follow Christ as well, and I can show you how. So I think this is really good. You don't give honor to the fool. What's the purpose in that? You want people to follow that? That's without purpose. This is without meaning. You don't just give out honor because it's politically correct, so-and-so needs some honor. No. You give out honor to the people who you want other people to be like. You want more of those kinds of people, right? And I think that's a great example for us. Sometimes I get a little bit, I want to be very careful when somebody has done something around the church, Melody has decorated or something like that, because I want people to honor her, but I know that she also didn't do it for honor, and she's not trying to get glory for it. And so I'll say it something like this. I'll say, she didn't do it for the purpose of honor, but we want to thank God for using her to do this thing. I don't try to hem and haw to get around and try to give her honor without trying to give glory beyond where it's due to the Lord. And I think that's good. I think that's how we ought to do it.
A similar thought along with that, I thought of maybe immaturity, in that if you want to appear to be able to be skillful in the sling, It's like, I don't know how to sling it yet. It might fall on my head. It might fall out of the sling. But I don't know those 3, 4, 4, all that kind of stuff. So you bind it there, and yes, it gives you that appearance of, hey, this person has skill. And in that same way, it's like, maybe you're not wise enough to give honor appropriately, and you just want to appear to be like one of those people that give out honor just because I want to give it out.
Yeah.
And you're giving it inappropriately, right? Right. And you're just kind of giving it out.
Yeah.
With the appearance. Right?
I think of ways in which people do that, and I'm thinking of an application where, this is the fellowship service. We can be loose about it. You guys heard about that Joshua Malakala guy who predicted the rapture 2 times, and now he's trying to re-predict it. It was supposedly going to be September 23rd and 24th of 2025, and then he redid it for October 6th and 7th. Well, he missed it too, so... now he's trying to redo it because we're past the 7th of October. But the people... I suppose one way that you can honor a fool is you don't have to be an honorable, important person to give honor to a fool. You could be just a regular person who follows these fools around, and you're giving them a platform, you're giving them honor, you're giving them your allegiance, but they're a fool. And that kind of goes along with what we're going to get into in a moment, so I'm going to try not to say too much. But yeah, I think we have to be careful who we are honoring in our hearts. We should be, because it's not just about other people following that person. It's about us now starting to follow that person. And we tend to follow the people that we set up in our hearts to honor. Well, let me show you chapter 18, if you'll go with me to chapter 18. Here's the last one I had listed under connecting the fool to shame. And I thought this one just ties in so very well with several other Proverbs that I should give it to you all together. So here it is, 18 verse 13. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. So I included this in this list because you have the folly, foolishness, and shame together. But here's the foolish thing that the man did that also brings him shame. He answers a matter, but he hasn't heard it yet. This is our society. This is our age. This is even many, many people in churches. It's even our tendencies, right? It is, I heard this thing. I've been told this thing. I'm taking a side. You haven't heard it out yet. You haven't thought it through yet. You haven't followed all the arguments and everything that's to be said about it. You've made your mind up. That is folly and shame. If you find yourself in a place where you have an opinion, and then you hear an opposing opinion, and you want to voice that opinion without having first heard out, that's foolish. The thing you should do is say, well, I don't have the time to look into that right now, so I'm going to be quiet until I've looked into it, until I've figured it out. And then once I do that, then I can speak on it. This is a Christian principle. This is what God calls us to as Christians. We as Christians should not speak on things we are not familiar with, that we haven't studied out. We should learn to say, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that. I say that a lot when people say, have you heard about, what do you think about? And I'll say, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that. Because my instinct is I either agree or disagree with that, but I feel like there's more to be looked into there. And that should be, and I try to make that my habit. Let me give you some more Proverbs on this, because this is not just once. It is over and over and over again in the Proverbs. Verse 17 of the same chapter. He that is first in his own cause seemeth just. He's the first one to present his case. That sounds right. But his neighbor cometh and searcheth him. Now, I don't know how many of you you're probably not a nerd like me and enjoy listening to scholarly debates, but I love listening to debates. And when I'm listening to a debate, somebody will get up and they'll give their opening statement, and I'll say, case closed, it's over. And then the next person gets up and gives his opening statement, and then I'm like, well, now I feel like he's right, you know? And then you get into the debate, and then you get to hear the sides out. And that's why debates are so good, because they help you hear the different arguments before you go and talk about it, right? And that's what's being said. That's first in his own cause, the first person to present his case, sounds like he's right. And then you hear his neighbor get up there and present the other case, and he searches it out. Without flipping a page, probably, you can go back to Proverbs 17, verse 27. This is very similar. It's not as direct as those two, but verse 27, he that hath knowledge spareth his words. The person with knowledge does not speak. He spares his words. And a man of understanding is of an excellent spirit, meaning his spirit is right, but he's careful with what comes out of his mouth. I heard this. I'm not 100% sure. I'm ready to answer that with intelligence, so I'm going to spare my words. This is well, I can tell you I'm convicted about this, because as a pastor, especially as a pastor that I emphasize in my ministry, answering difficult questions about the Bible, I get some questions that I'm not able to answer. And my instinct is, give them an answer. And I always have to fight this. And maybe you can think of some times when I've failed, and I apologize if that's the case. But I have to work at saying, I don't actually know the answer to that. But here's the thoughts I have off the top of my head, and I need to do more thinking before I speak to it specifically. Let me give you just two more. Chapter 25, verse 8, and then we'll go to one in chapter 26. Chapter 25, verse 8, go not forth hastily to strive. Again, we saw the word strife is often linked to legal battles in the Proverbs, and it's not specifically that here, but it could be used in that way for a kind of legal battle. Don't rush into a legal battle, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. You rushed into this case, and you weren't ready for the rebuttal that was going to come from your neighbor, and now you get shame. Here's one in chapter 26. He that passeth by and... Oh, I'm sorry. Verse 17. You got it. It's just all of 26. Verse 17. He that passeth by and meddleth with strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. We've actually talked about this one already in our study, but it fits with what we're talking about here. You're passing by, you see strife, you decide who's right, and then meddle in it. You don't have any idea who's right. You haven't heard the case out. You don't even know what's going on, but you jump into it, and guess what? Both of them are going to be against you. It's like taking a dog by the ears. You forgot about the mouth, right? So what I'm saying is that, and we're just looking in the book of Proverbs, this is all throughout the scriptures, that Christian people should not be people who jump to conclusions, who defend things because, well, I've always believed this. We should be thoughtful people. This is, by the way, why we study doctrines on Wednesdays, because we don't want to just say, here's the things that we believe, go believe them, and go fight for them against other people who don't believe. No, we want to say, okay, here's why we believe this. Here's the case. And here's what they would say on the other side, and here's why they believe that. Because I want you to hear out the problem, because that is a biblical process. Hearing out both sides and saying, okay, all right, okay. Now I'm able to talk about this or think about this in a better way. It's so unbiblical so unbiblical for Christian people to go around entrenched in positions that they could never be convinced could possibly be wrong. I mean, unless they've studied it out and carefully can explain in detail why the Scripture teaches this. The example I gave before about people just, it's the rapture's happening, and thousands of people were posting videos. I got confirmation in a dream that the rapture is happening. It's going to happen. I'm not listening to the scoffers and the mockers, anyone who would criticize and say this isn't right, this isn't biblical. They're scoffers and mockers. I'm not listening to them. Why? Well, they decided that this guy was right, and nothing could convince them otherwise. They hadn't even thought it through carefully, and they refused to think it through carefully. That would be scoffing and mocking. That is unchristian. That is an unchristian attitude. It is an ungodly attitude. A godly attitude is not close your eyes, close your ears, and believe the things I tell you to believe. A godly attitude is let's look carefully at this. Let's think about this. All right, what are some of your thoughts on those verses?
God and His Word is truth. And that's a big thing that God put forward, that we're constantly reminded that Thy Word is truth, and that's something that we should be putting forward. So when we're not trying to find the truth and we're just sharing our own opinion, Proverbs 18:2, it says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion."
Yeah. Oh, where's that? How did I miss that one? Oh, man.
God doesn't ask us, go share your opinion with the world. He says, go give my truth to the world. So we're being very full representatives of Christ if we're just sharing our own opinion.
Yeah, that's, so, in case anyone missed that. A fool, Proverbs 18:2, a fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. He's not really interested in hearing it out or understanding. Yeah. We can probably all recognize this in conversations we've had with other people, or else if you don't recognize it, maybe you're the person. Yeah. But maybe we recognize it in our own hearts sometimes. I certainly, there was certainly a phase in my life where I was just, this is true. And then there was a time when I said, I'm not sure if I know why I believe those things. And then I started digging. But that's true. And I wonder why we don't ask questions instinctively. And I wonder if it's not because we're afraid that the position, and not in the situation of a parent and a child necessarily, but when someone who has an opposing view comes at us that we haven't really looked into, we're sometimes afraid to ask questions because we might be a little nervous about that. What if I find out that they have good points? I don't know if I really. Yeah. Exactly, and I think, and what Tori made the point earlier about how God is truth. Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." His word is truth. As Christians, we should never be afraid of truth.
Right.
If it's true, it's true. Right? Now, we know that Christ rose from the dead. He lives within our hearts. So we have confidence that nobody's going to come around and be able to disprove the Scriptures because we already know it's true. But so if someone comes around trying to say something that you disagree with, all right, well, let me talk to you. Okay, well, maybe I need to go do a little research to give you answers to this or whatever. But we shouldn't be afraid of truth because truth is on our side, right? It seems to me that we just don't allow for nuance in our society. You're red or you're blue. You're black or you're white. You're this or you're that. You can't be, you support Israel or you don't support Israel. You can't say, well, I want the Jewish people to succeed, but I don't want evil things to happen if they're doing evil stuff, right? You can't have a nuanced opinion. You got to be all or nothing, Oh Lord, we're so grateful for your truth. And we're thankful that we all have come to the truth that you have given us in your word and come to find salvation in Jesus Christ. And help us to not be the ones, the fools, who would stop seeking for truth at that point and just be satisfied with our salvation and run around with whatever opinions we have. Help us to be careful, wise Christians. Help us to go from here guarding our words, guarding our pride, careful to humble ourselves and recognize things that we don't know, and working as best you enable us to learn the things that we don't know so we can speak more intelligently on issues. I pray that you'd help us to be known not only as a church who loves you and who loves your word, but also a church that is careful with our words and wise. We thank you for these things. In Jesus' name.